The return of the EU question is quite interesting, and more so because I think people haven't really realised that it's nothing to do with economics. I think that's a smokescreen. The reason why I say this is, well, there's several angles on it. First of all, if you look at the economic predictions in the referendum 10 years ago, they were completely over the top, wildly inaccurate, and obviously dishonest. Many people may have believed them. The believers were led by politicians who were fully aware that it wasn't anything to do with economics. It's something more fundamental. Society and culture, the intersubjective, are what drive politics. The intersubjective is a place that has no physical presence, consciousness, and therefore has no agency. But it has gigantic influence, particularly because language is there, and words are essential to communication. To an extent, we make the intersubjective, and the intersubjective, if it doesn't make us, has massive influence on us. It's not a either or, as the linguistic philosophers might have it, that either you accept that we are creatures of language and therefore all you need to do is to deconstruct language and you find out the ultimate truth. That's a strange robotic view about people and deeply insulting, not least because it strips agency away from individuals at this sort of behest of an academic theory. And then the intersubjective, because it contains these contradictions, it accommodates them. The same thing applies to culture, which is also there. And these bear on politics heavily. They also bear on views of morality and on the essential hypocrisy of all human beings. No one can know everything, and everyone makes mistakes. The habit of ascribing hypocrisy to someone who's changed their mind is deeply unpleasant. For instance, years ago, in my teens, I had some pretty abhorrent views about the way the disabled should be treated, the seriously disabled. And it's only with later life, after a few years of, as it were, living by myself and away from the influence of that social clique or caste which I was brought up in, that I began to realise that the essentials of basic humanity. And that's very, very different. Anyway, what we see now is Burnham's popping up, and he's following on from Starmer. Starmer's sort of trying to inveigle the UK back into the EU. Now, I think he realises this is not an economic cure-all, a sort of gold mine to make this country rich again. I think he's not so deluded, nor is Burnham. What they're doing really is a form of cultural war. They're talking about culture wars. It's lazy talk, really, because what's going on is something more extreme. The dominating forces of power in the United Kingdom are keen on the elimination of legacy culture in society to make space for ideological domination. It's not a war of culture, it's a war of a sort of, I've used the word, genocidal war against culture. They want it gone. They want the culture, legacy culture, gone, because they take both of those, hold both of those abstractions, which can't have agency, as if they did have agency and they were evil creatures poisoning the minds of otherwise good, compliant and conformist people who actually would love the EU and all things bright little stars on a blue background and painted faces and, oh, we're all part of a big family, happy clappy. like very small children, still innocent, at the age of about 3. They'll believe almost anything, and it's a delight because the innocence is there. Yes, there are 1 or 2 evil children. They do exist, but they're rare. Equally, there are 1 or 2 children exactly the opposite, almost saintly. They'll be good regardless. And in the middle, there's a bunch of children, just like in the adult world, who will be good or bad depending upon how much they're lent on, how pliable they are. So, for instance, there are some people, and I've met 1 or 2 in my life, who make my blood run cold. And the sooner they're out of the room, or I'm away from them, the better. And there are others in whose company you think all your cynical thoughts about humanity and worries about the baddies and the misled evaporate, because you're in presence of someone who seems to have impregnable character and will be good regardless. They do exist. History's littered with them, of supremely ultimate individuals, giving their lives in many cases for the lives of others. And those who say, oh, all human beings are essentially selfish and, we're a dirty, hopeless bunch of creatures, they don't know half of it. And they're usually individuals who are lost souls themselves. Anyway, the EU. I believe what's really going on is there's a large number of people who want rid of our past. They've been inculcated with guilt because the past is a pretty ghastly place. And that applies almost everywhere across the world. There are no angel nations, no gardens of Eden, no secret places of pure innocence. That's rubbish. Complete rubbish. Dangerous stuff. Because it's a form of utopianism which authoritarians latch on to. You see, if you believe or if you think you know of one of these places and you want everyone to enjoy this paradise on earth, then anyone who dares contradict you or gets in the way is elementally immoral to the extent of, if they refuse to convert, calling for their own execution. After all, they're standing in the way of all that's good. And so, really, they're poison. Ideology is a very, very nasty sin. And you can see it in Burnham. You certainly saw it in Starmer. And you see it in, I'm guessing, about 80% of the Labour Party MPs. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least 50% of the Tory MPs are like that. The Greens are totally lost, I think. Our local MP in North Herefordshire is a supremely good constituency MP. She works like a dog to try and sort out problems, and her staff, I can see them come out of the office sometimes late in the day with that sort of power of having worked their guts out to try and help their constituents in a mess with the NHS or whatever. Could be a bad employer. They do exist. And the NHS, by golly, can be a third-rate employer. The recent case of the women being forced to share a changing room and getting upset about it with someone who they considered to be not female, but the NHS lost, is a prime example. There's dozens of them. What on earth is the NHS doing to try and force staff to deny physical reality? In the intersubjective, that's different, because in the intersubjective you can have incoherent and contradictory entities. You can't have that physical reality. And physical reality of a woman or a man demands the safety of their bodies and freedom from fear of assault, or even just the assault of someone leering at them, because that is almost as bad. So, coming back to what we're getting at now, the EU as a cultural project is what's attractive. And claims of nationalism don't really wash, because you see flag waving St George's flags, Union Jacks and so on from people who often are not too keen on the EU. Yet when you see pro-EU people, you see painted faces. Yes, the flags draped over their shoulders, all that sort of nonsense. The same devices of nationalism, the same divisive attitude. The difference, though, with the pro-EU is they constantly refer to supposed economic figures about, oh, we're much poorer than Brexit never happened, and the what-ifs, the counterfactuals come out. It's extraordinarily hard to prove anything with a counterfactual. Yes, if you were some very basic, like you could finger absolutely certainly that 50,000 people more died because we weren't in the EU. Yeah, that might be very significant, but that doesn't happen. Things are more complicated there. So if you strip away the economic B.S, just get rid of it. And the same goes for the pro-Brexit people. Just strip it away. What you really have is legacy culture and society getting fed up with people who want it gone. Going into the EU in a way it's a political act of trying to order the intersubjective to conform to ideological objectives. And so the pro-EU people want to, as it were, cleanse the intersubjective. And one way of doing that, or the key way, is to eradicate legacy culture and society. It's really very obvious when you see it that way. Now, countering this view is difficult. That's countering their view that, it is all about economics and all that sort of stuff. Because you first need to understand the nature of culture and society, and you need to appreciate the importance of contradictory entities and understand the importance of incoherence. This goes right to the essence of being human, because we are contradictory and incoherent in our minds and thinking. I have yet to see anyone who could stand up and say, I've never been proved wrong, and get away with it. And that's for a good reason, because part of being human is to have the freedom, it's important, the freedom to make mistakes. If you never made a mistake, you wouldn't be human. You would be a robot, a logic creature. Also, among other things, you'd be able to tell the future. Because if you make a decision now and then 5 years' time proves to be disastrous, who is to know? Oh, only someone who could tell the future. And that's just absolutely crazy. Another point is, of course, and this nestles within a very simple observation, is that we're all essentially flawed. The observation is even hypocrites can speak the truth. And like the, oh, I've never been proved wrong attitude, someone who's, those who leap up and try and find an excuse not to listen to people who've been hypocritical are on very shaky ground, because every human has been hypocritical and will be hypocritical to a greater or lesser extent, even possibly small things, like telling off children for, I don't know, putting their hands in their pockets. Okay, that's a stupid thing, but you see the point. You might be more so, you might tell off a child for not finishing a meal, or for using bad language. Well, adults are pretty good at bad language. They may not do it pas devant les enfants, but by golly, they can throw it out when they want to. So, hypocrisy is part of the human condition also. We are very sophisticated creatures because we can contain and hold unresolved contradictions in our heads. That's quite important by the second paradox of reason, because if we couldn't do that and we were obliged to process everything using the pure logic before it popped into our memory or into our reasoning later on, given the massive amount of stuff coming through our eyes and senses and so on and so forth, and information in language, our brains would just give it up. We would lose the ability to reason and think, and we would die. So, coming back to this culture thing, the reason why the pro-EU people particularly, but Brexit people also do this to an extent, get away with this mask of pretending it's economic and so on and so forth, and getting away with denial that this is really a form of cultural and social assassination or usurpation at best, is because it's very hard, because lacking sophistication about understanding the nature of culture and reason, to be able to get to grips with what's going on. Once you see the nature of intersubjective and its inconsistent, incoherent entities, and get to grips with that idea, then the mask of politics, the deception that's being employed by the likes of Starmer, Burnham's going to be at it big time, will slip. And you'll see underneath it is about domination and control. It is shocking when you see it that way. The dishonesty is appalling. Not least because people who are keen on the EU, in many cases, genuinely believe that that is a more moral, decent, honest and positive way of looking at the world and arranging things. Strip that away and their disillusionment will be absolute. Nearly all of them have no idea about fundamentals of the EU and why it's not democratic as such. It's what they call limited democracy. Now, you can argue that may be right or wrong. I'm not going to argue that point here, even though my opinion is pretty obvious. For instance, the Commission has sole right to submit proposals for laws. No law can exist in the EU, and no amendment can exist in the EU, in effect, in the second case, because there is a useless proviso about unanimous opposition from the Council of Ministers to a proposal for an amendment. None of those can exist without permission of an appointed EU. The way the chairman of the EU, the president of the EU, is appointed is weird, and it certainly isn't democratic. No one ever voted for von der Leyen except for a small cabal. And then the president also has control over who's going to be the appointees from the member nations, because they're obliged to appoint someone who's acceptable to the Commissioner. The Commissioner can veto appointees until someone suitably EU compliant is selected by the nations to become their Commissioner. Yeah, the EU is not democratic. Now, if those facts were put in front of many of the people who are wildly keen on the EU, they might think, well, this is a bit odd. But most of them generally think it's democratic. And then they point to our flawed democratic system to justify the EU, which is pretty weird, really, to suggest that the foundations of the EU should rely on the apparent corruption and failure of the British system. It makes the British system rather an important foundation stone for the EU. That's sort of a bit odd. So there you go. We're interesting times. I think if there is going to be another really serious fight about the EU, and I smell something coming up, then it's very important to be able to strip away the bogus economic arguments and get down to brass tacks. Whether that will happen, I don't know. But already this we'll be billions of pounds richer if we'd stayed in the EU type argument is beginning to look pretty thin argument. Yet the pro-Brexit people haven't really got their ducks in a row about what the argument's really about. It's about society and culture. They're the ones that drive politics. And politicians who try and think that politics should somehow manipulate people and make a sort of wonderful society from ideology are the really dangerous people. So we'll see what happens in the next few months. But with impending economic challenges, which look like they're going to be far greater than those in the middle to late 70s, may well force people to think in a different way. And that wouldn't be a good scene. Anyway, bye for now.